I've always loved nature and just being outdoors. My parents brought me camping a handful of times when I was a kid, but I really got into it once I was an adult. I would go camping as often as possible. Eventually, my friend Aaron and I would go together. We would try to find the most rural areas to camp at. Most of the time, we wouldn't run into another single person at the areas we picked. Over time, our camping tactics evolved. We went from bringing all sorts of supplies to bringing the bare minimum just to survive. We would bring a flint and a knife to start a fire, an axe to chop wood, and bottles to collect fresh water. Aside from that, we would build our own shelter and find our own food. If we camped near a river or stream, we would set up traps to catch fish. We would also try to build snares and other traps to catch animals. Sometimes we would carve spears to try to catch fish that way. We tried basically everything and anything to fish and hunt. We would also eat berries and any other edible plants. We were well versed in what was safe to eat. The more we challenged ourselves, the more enjoyable our camping trips became. Of course, we often ended up wet, cold, hungry, etc., but that's how we liked it. The more challenging the environment was, the better. So, like we often did, we packed up our few items we were going to bring with us, selected a remote destination far from civilization, and began our long drive to where we were going to spend our weekend. It took us a little longer to get there than we originally expected due to having trouble locating the spot, but we eventually found it. At this point, it was beginning to get dark. There was still some light for us to use, but the sun was in the process of setting. We both went our separate ways and immediately began gathering supplies. I was gathering wood and items we could use as tinder, and Aaron was gathering supplies to build us a shelter. The rest we could worry about later. Once I had enough materials brought back to the campsite, I got the fire started with little to no problem. At that point, I began assisting Aaron with our shelter. We put a lot of work into it, and also ran into a little bit of luck with the materials we found. But I would say this particular shelter could rival just about any tent. Once the fire was started and the shelter was finished, we discussed what we would do in regards to obtaining other provisions, most importantly water, but also food. It was dark out at this point, and we decided that it would be difficult for us to try to set up traps or snares or attempt to hunt. So we decided to just call it a night and get some rest. After all the work we did, in addition to the long drive, we were both absolutely exhausted. Being a man-made shelter, it wasn't the most comfortable surface I've ever slept on, but I fell asleep immediately anyway and slept like a log. The following day, we woke up early, just as the sun was rising. We spent all morning setting up traps and snares. We were able to hike about a half-mile to a pretty decent river to collect fresh water. Even though the water from the river wasn't stagnant, we still sterilized it. We sifted it through rocks and sand to remove any particles in it, and then boiled it on the fire. We checked our traps and snares but found nothing. We ended up carving a couple sticks into spears and headed back to the river. It took us 2 hours of standing in the shallow part of the river, but miraculously, we were able to spear and catch enough fish to have a pretty awesome dinner. We headed back to our campsite and cooked the fish on the fire. They were absolutely delicious, especially with how hungry I was at the time. After we got done eating, we sat around the fire and just talked and enjoyed ourselves. A short time later, we both decided to go to sleep. I don't know for sure how long I was sleeping, but I was suddenly woken up by a man chuckling loud in the distance. At first, I thought Aaron wasn't able to sleep and was playing a joke on me, but I looked over in our shelter and saw that he was still asleep. I didn't make a noise and sat as still as possible. I began thinking that this was all in my head and I must have been having a weird dream that woke me up. We were literally miles away from any type of civilization. That's when I heard the man chuckling again. This time, I knew it wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just the fact that there was a random guy all the way out here where we were, but the way he was chuckling was just so unsettling. To this day, I've never heard anyone laugh or chuckle in such a creepy, ominous way. I heard the man chuckle once more, and that's when I decided I needed to wake Aaron up. He was confused and a little bit annoyed at first, but right after I woke him up, the man then started whistling. Immediately, Aaron's expression turned to concern and fear. He mouthed, "What the fuck," to me, and I just gave him that I don't know look. We both sat up and continued to stare at each other, as if we were both waiting for the other to come up with some sort of idea of what to do. The whistling continued, and it's hard for me to explain, but it sounded like he was doing it in some sort of way to mess with us. It was odd enough to even run into another person where we were camping, but to have this happen was nothing short of terrifying. We couldn't see the man. We didn't know how dangerous he was or what his intentions were. Aaron retrieved his knife out of his belongings as quietly as possible. We both remained silent, unsure what to do. Neither of us wanted to escalate the situation, and I was just hoping this person would go away. But instead, the whistling grew louder and louder as the man got closer to our campsite. I was able to hear footsteps at this point. Our shelter was well built, and there really wasn't any open exposures anywhere, except for the small area to crawl in and out of it. Eventually, we could hear the footsteps come right up to our shelter and stop right in front of the entrance. Aaron and I were both frozen in fear. Aaron was gripping his knife, holding it out in front of him. Seconds continued to go by, and there was no more movement. There was just silence. The man wasn't walking, chuckling, whistling, or doing anything. Aaron and I looked at each other again. I was just as confused as I was scared. And then, out of nowhere, the man let out a blood-curdling scream. Aaron and I stood up as far as our shelter would allow us. We were ready to fight for our lives. But then we heard footsteps again. This time, we heard the man running away from our campsite. We both crawled out of our shelter and looked in the direction we heard the man run off to, but it was too dark to actually see the man. We sat up the rest of the night, as neither of us were going to let our guard down and even attempt to sleep. The crazy man never returned that night. As soon as the smallest amount of daylight came up, we gathered our few belongings and booked it to the car. We never figured out what happened that night, and have only been able to speculate what took place. My assumption is that we happened to set our campsite up in the same vicinity as where some deranged homeless man lived, and for whatever reason, he felt it necessary to torment us. Luckily, he didn't do us any actual harm, at least not physically. Aaron and I still continued to camp. That man wasn't going to scare us off from doing what we loved. Nowadays, we bring my small 9mm with us. We have it with us only for self-defense and not for hunting. We still rely on the very most basic items. But although we have some security now and still continue to go camping, we haven't ever returned to that particular location. I'm not convinced that there is an afterlife or such a thing as ghosts or demons. But I once saw something in the woods that felt so unnatural, it made me second guess how I see the world. I was hiking up a hillside, thick with trees, in the middle of the night during a long weekend. Some friends and I decided we would hike to the top of the hill and light off some fireworks. Approaching the hill and surrounding the base of this hill was a rolling grass valley. It was around midnight, full moon plus light mist, straight out of a horror movie. The strange part was I wasn't nervous or scared or anything. I was having a great night with my buddies. I didn't have any of my defenses up. My buddies and I just hiked in a straight line through the rolling grass valley approaching the hill, when something caught my eye. On my right, I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing perfectly upright on the top of the small grassy hill. It was standing there right next to a large dead tree. I couldn't make out any details. Both the tree and the tall figure were silhouetted under the moonlight. The strange part was seeing this figure didn't scare me. I didn't immediately sense any threat. I almost assumed it might have been just another hiker or somebody having a smoke. I passively turned my flashlight on it, and that's when it happened. In an instant, as my light hit the spot where this figure was standing, it instantly moved just outside of the range of my flashlight, like it teleported or something. But just as vividly as I saw it standing in its initial spot, as my light hit that spot and the figure moved, I could see it standing just outside the range of my light. My breath paused. In an instant, a wave of dread washed over me. Something felt 100% unnatural about what just happened. As a reflex, I moved my light to the new spot where the figure was, and as my light passed it, it disappeared. I've never passed out in my entire life. Not from heat, not from getting knocked out, never. But in that moment, I felt my knees give away from under me, and I just fell to the ground. My friends turned and looked at me trying to pick myself up, and my knees were too wobbly to stand. They helped me, and I tried to explain to them what I experienced. I'm willing to bet it was all just lights and shadows playing games with my eyes. But I'll never be able to explain that sensation I felt, of feeling like I had just seen something I shouldn't have seen. Something so unnatural that my body's instinctual reaction was to go limp. My story involves myself and 3 of my really good friends throughout my whole childhood. We'll have them go by Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy, who I am good friends with to this day. I could not write this story to you without their help, consent, and experiences as well. The story you're about to read is true and not made up in any way. Regardless, whether we'd been seeing things or not, the reality is we'd experienced something very horrifying the one night at my friend Kevin's cabin. We thought long and hard about actually sharing it or not, afraid of being ridiculed, but we're ready to share with the community and, again, you had to be there to experience it. One of my friends had actually suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed counseling in itself. Regardless, I would like you to know, also, I have always been a skeptic on the paranormal, and find it very hard to believe in many aspects. But, I love to watch, listen, and read on it simply because I always love to have an open mind in life. An open mind, in my opinion, is a growing one. Whether it was paranormal or not, something was clearly there that night. Now, finally on with the story. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, me and a couple of my good friends, who I'd already mentioned, all the way through my childhood, always made time to go up to one of my friends' family cabins, way up north in the forest of Minnesota. Throughout all of our young years, we would always go, for sure accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad, who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature enough and old enough to go to the cabin on our own, finally without Kevin's dad or any other adult supervision that may have accompanied us. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. My friend's cabin is very remote and very little based upon a very large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was a solid quarter or half mile away at least, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. I want to mention, to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island, as his cabin was on an island, and take his boat across the lake about a half mile to reach the cabin. This lake is huge. My mind always had a tendency to run around when sleeping there at night throughout all of my years, for it was all one level with only 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen, living room connected, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtain to it at all, so it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. And this is where my mind would run, as I always thought someone was peering in, and of course nobody ever was. I'd been to this cabin a couple dozen times throughout my lifespan and nothing ever happened, and the older I got, the easier it was to sleep. Now for the event. We usually would stay a week's worth, or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were there on our own finally, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beer all night. I don't condone underage drinking, by the way. We just happened to sneak some, being the rebels we are. We went out to his dock to gaze up at the magnificent stars and enjoy our buzz, when all of a sudden we heard something out of the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash came from, having our poles ready 24/7. Thankfully the moon was out that night, which helped to light up the lake. Otherwise, it would be dark as black, with there being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would not have been able to see anything on the lake. My one friend, Ryan, began to point out by saying, what the hell is that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I can describe is that it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring directly at us. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field length out in the lake from us. There's no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very palish skin like a face, but couldn't make out the eyes, mouth, nose, or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, arm, all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake and do their hunting late, and also have black with white colors on their coats, and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that a loon all of a sudden popped up in the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that scenario. All of us, having the creeps and noticing it wasn't moving one bit, just treading water in its same place, went back to our campfire, lit it up even brighter, and headed inside to drink more. I'd like to mention that there was a staircase outside my friend's cabin, about 8 stairs in length, down to the bottom where the fire pit was. We soon forgot about the head, with the help of the beer, until I had to use the bathroom really bad, and the one inside was preoccupied. I just went outside to do my business, since we were in the great outdoors. When I had been taking a pee and glancing out at the beautiful moon-lit lake, I noticed that black circle object was still there, but about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring right at me. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun for years, and a very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come look quick, keeping my eyes glued to it at the door to the cabin. We came outside to see it still there looking at us, as if this head was corked up with its chin in the air. Nobody dared to go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it probably wasn't a loon, because a loon wouldn't have treaded the water in the same spot. Eventually the current would have drifted it somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving a single muscle, just staring up at us from the deck instead. There was no ripple effect at all in the lake from the object. We said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too. A few hours would pass. It was super late into the night at this point, and we knew we needed to sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking that the log must have floated off or just hit the shore somewhere. We slept with the windows open that night, as there was no AC in this cabin, and we had to keep them open or else we would fry in the middle of summer. Me and my other buddy, Tommy, slept in the living room, while my 2 other friends slept in the 2 separate bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep but keeping my eyes peeled shut, I began to hear someone walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin. I thought I was about to shit bricks. No question what or whoever I heard down there was on the dock now, pacing back and forth, as if it made the sound of a boat clicking on the wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves, and it lasted for about 3 minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and my ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 steps up the deck stairs, all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone and a couple minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy, asking him if he heard the steps. With both of us sitting up, I was startled when my friend Ryan came walking out of his room, saying we needed to leave just minutes after these steps vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt he could come out as well, but either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him why. He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go! Get to the boat, it's time to go!" Asking him, What, Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you?" He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff, and I will never forget what he explained to us. He said when he was turning sides on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in at the top right corner of his window, and it quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and long black hair down the window. Again, another thing I would like to add, when we look back at what he experienced, it chills us to the bone, realizing that since this face was in the top right corner of the window in my friend's room that he was sleeping in, this thing was either damn near 8 feet tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Ryan then continued to say, "Let's fucking go," very seriously. Absolutely disturbed the fuck out of my mind and feeling like I was going to be sick, and then telling them what my friend and I heard in the living room, we all agreed to pack our stuff and booked it, not cleaning the cabin or anything. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw barefoot prints in the dirt, heading off into the path all around the cabin. We picked up our step getting to the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us, threw our stuff onto the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or to look in the water, thank God. My eyes were just glued to the island, trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we had finally gotten our stuff packed in the car, and the boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving for about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, the one who saw the person outside of his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car sobbing, saying, "What was it, guys? Oh fuck, what did I see?" We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back, and that Ryan was freaking out, and they told us just to get home safely and quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up there the following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but did mention bare footprints were still lingering about, which he thought was odd, because someone walking around his property bugged him badly. Whatever my friend saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights, and ended up having to seek some help for a couple weeks, and hop on some sleeping medicine. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but isn't too comfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. I, to this day, cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, and cannot explain what I saw in the lake and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we're told by my friend's dad who owns it, which I believe him. I personally have decided to never go back to that cabin, which really makes me sad because I had great childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. A lot of people have cabins on this island, So it could have been a prank in the makings that had been busted when Ryan saw the person at the window, or the person possibly wanted to do something worse. I will never be able to explain what was floating in the lake, but the fact that this incident, along with the bare feet and someone looking in at Ryan all in the same night, seems like more than a coincidence. My story takes place in the Tahoe Forest, and it involves one of the most terrifying moments of my life. My wife and I were off-road in my truck, camping wherever the day would leave us. Well, one night we continued well into the night, driving in some crazy situations where there would be extremely steep, high drop-offs on the left side of the road, and the mountain on the right, with the whole road tilting the truck to the left as if it was trying to kill us. After going uphill at a very steep angle off camber like this, we were tired and needed to sleep. Finally, after 3 minutes of slow butt-cheek tightening driving with your life on the line, we came down from the mountain and found a spot to sleep. Parked the truck, jumped in the back, and lights out. I woke up in the morning first, got up, peed, and smoked a bowl. She was still asleep. I started making coffee and decided to take a look around in the immediate area, like maybe 50 feet in every direction. Well, I got around this tree, and I see this station wagon pull up to within 20 feet of us or so. I came out of the brushy area a bit to make sure nobody would be surprised by my presence. There were 2 guys and some kids. The guys looked young, around 25 to 30, and 3 small kids, maybe 3 to 6 years old. The guys kind of looked like they could be halfway good people, so I said howdy when they parked. One had a shotgun, but again, I felt cool with it because they seemed alright. They were cool with me. They packed a bowl and asked me if I wanted to hit. Of course, I said. They even offered me a few shotgun shells, saying the 3-inch mags didn't fit this. As I'm sitting there, smoking a bowl, I look around at the kids. Damn, they're dirty. Dirty faces, torn clothing. I look at the car and it's beat to hell. These guys aren't in the best shape either. Well, no big deal. Some people are poor and some people are homeless. It's okay. But it made me start thinking and wondering how a homeless person could survive 1 year in a place that killed Donner Party, let alone with little kids. I didn't know how I was feeling at this point, but I could still tell that neither of these guys posed a threat to me. And then it happened. A truck came barreling around the corner ahead, hauling ass, coming right towards us. One of the guys I'm standing next to burning with says, "Oh great, it's my older brother and his friends." I look back at the truck. What do I see? There's 3 guys in the back of the truck, and 2 of them are standing up. One is holding a shotgun. About 3 of the 5 were screaming like drunk college guys. As it got closer, the silhouettes of the people in the truck gave way to their faces. I was able to see them clearly by the time they got within 20 feet of us, because they were slowing down, preparing to stop and talk to his brother. The other guy standing up in the back also had a gun, a rifle I think, but he was holding it low. Now I can see them and see their faces and eyes. How can I put this? Deliverance, anyone? Oh Lord, nature can be cruel sometimes. The whole of them looked about in their 30s to 40s and bushy crazy hair, dirty rag clothes, the whole 9 yards. Their appearance was bad, but there is a limit on nature's impact on a human being. The only thing to go beyond the limit of the spirit of a person. Your spirit shows in your eyes. Some of us out there can see the truth. I mention this because even if someone is totally ugly, they can still be a great person. I judge on the content of character and the truth behind the eyes. I tell you, after looking at the psycho in the back waving the shotgun around while they're driving and getting a good look at the bunch of them, I had an instant intuition. Bad vibes. Real bad. I felt myself in the presence of evil. I've felt it before, and it's been right before. I had a vision of my wife getting up and them looking over and seeing my truck and my woman. I got a hot one, fellas. I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, they got nothing. Look at me. I got this nice 4x4. I got a pretty and clean wife. I got halfway clean jeans on. They might even think I have money, which is wrong. It would be easy for 7 armed guys with weapons like they were to get me if they wanted to pull one. I should not even make them think that we might be becoming friends or anything. We are not hanging out. Hell, I should not even say anything else. I've already said too much, as in simply friendly conversation with the other guys in the first place. Some people may interpret that as a gesture of friendship and may get angry and mad when it turns out that there will be no friendship. Yes, I know you'd have to be a psycho, but this is what we're talking about here. You know how sometimes you get that little feeling inside right before something horrible happens? Sometimes you hear it clear, other times it's real subtle. Holy shit, this one smacked me upside in the head. No wondering about anything. The thought was clear. Go now. Now. Now mind you, my brain works pretty fast, especially when it needs to. So while I first saw their faces at 20 feet, all this thought takes place in my mind before they actually stop the truck. Right as the truck stops and the doors are opening, and the guys are jumping out from the back of it, I look over and see my wife waking up. I turn to the guys I was smoking with and say, "Thanks for everything, dude. I gotta go before she gets mad. See ya." And I start walking away, not even giving the newcomers a chance to meet me. No chance to ask, "Is that your truck? Is that your girl?" I didn't run, but I walked fast. Halfway to my truck, I hear, "Where's he going?" behind me. I speed up the pace. I hear them laughing back there. I get to within talking distance to my wife and tell her, "Get down and stay down." She was sitting up in the back of my truck in a sleeping bag. She got down right away. Although I'm quite sure they already saw her, out of sight is out of mind. I get in the truck, start it, and drive immediately. As we're pulling away, I can hear the truck start up. No way. I hang a turn, punch the gas softly but quickly, make a turn and drive for a little bit, telling my wife what's up the whole time. I pull down off the side of the main dirt road for a second to let the girl in. On the main road above us now, I hear a truck. I look up and sure enough, there they go. After waiting a minute, I pulled back out and tried to find my best way out of the area. We make a turn and end up in what appears to be another country. It was like a bunch of homeless people living in a forest, almost like the stuff you'd see in third world countries. Their homes were usually a rusted and destroyed car, upside down boat, or a tarp ran across branches, etc. Every single square inch of land was covered by garbage, even some with no reason, like an old dirty bathtub. Baghdad in California. It appeared these were squares, like each person had his own square of land. How about that? Private property by homeless people. I think this may have something to do with the mining claims. Anyway, this is Filth City. But I'm not worried about any of these people I'm seeing. They seem different. No threat felt. Nevertheless, now is not the time to relax and appreciate the forest-dwelling garbage collectors. We keep driving, figuring we'll be through it soon. But no. We're lost in the freaking maze of tiny little roads, completely surrounded by these forest people everywhere we look. We're so deep in this little jungle, it's nuts. Looking around the corner before we make the turn to make sure that truck is not there. Finally, after what seemed like forever, which was probably about 10 minutes, we got out of that forest village, and hopefully also away from those inbred psychos in that truck. We pulled over and secured the stuff that was flopping around in the back of the truck, and kept on until we hit the highway sometime later. We were safe. Now, it would be a natural reaction, even for myself reading such a story, to think that I overreacted and blew things out of proportion. After all, not a punch was thrown, not a shot was fired. You must understand that I am not a stranger to clear and present danger. I have been shot at twice, at a range of less than 30 feet both times, and I have had a friend stabbed in front of me. I have been jumped countless times, and I have been knocked out. I have come across bears while on foot. I have ran from cops. I have had my eyes full of tears, praying out loud, slowly walking off a thinly iced lake that was breaking underneath my feet. I have even had an entire group of thugs attack me for refusing to tell them where my friend lives because they wanted to kick his ass. And finally, I've even had a 9 to my head and have the trigger drop on an empty chamber, only to discover later by this idiot that there was a round jammed, and the only reason it didn't go off is because it jammed in the action. I mention these to you to express the fact that I have been in scary situations in the past, ones that some of you may call more scary than the one above. I would agree with you, because you had to be there. You had to have that feeling. It's so hard to describe, but all the other scary stuff in my life, and all the other feelings, none compares to the urgency of this one. I truly felt that if I didn't do what I did then, we would be dead right now.